Hey, thanks for joining us. This is the first ever episode of the Generation Gems podcast. I'm Mathew Foutz, and I'm pleased and honored to be here actually with my pops. This is Sterling Foutz, the patriarch of the Foutz family and the head of the gem miners, the gem hunters, the big fella himself. Dad, thanks for coming.
I'm glad to be here, Matt.
This is fun.
Yeah.
We don't ever actually get to spend a lot of time just sitting down and talking because we're always busy, busy lives, busy work and everything.
Yeah, very busy.
And it feels like we talk about Turquoise all the time, but it's been a long time since we've talked about kind of where Turquoise has come from. I think we've been in the weeds with all the changes in mining that it's at a point now where stuff has changed so much from a supply standpoint that it's interesting to look back and see how many different phases the turquoise market has gone through over the years. Talk a little bit about your start with Kingman and Sleeping Beauty and how you got started.
Well, I started back in 1972.
I was born that year.
Yes.
It's a good year. That was a good year.
Yeah, that made me think I better get to work. So anyway, I started out in New Mexico in 1973. And at that time, there was the tail end of the boom going on.
The big turquoise boom.
The big boom. And I realized very quickly I needed to get involved with two main turquoise supplies at that time, which was L.W. Hardy.
And Mr. Hardy had both the Arizona mines at that point, the big ones, the Kingman and Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, he had the Kingman and the Sleeping Beauty mine.
So it was it's kind of like a monopoly because those were the two big producers.
Then the other big producer, just as big, but he didn't get the attention that Hardy's did, was Dow Ward's mines in Nevada, the number 8 and the Fox mine.
Fox, yeah.
And he had several other ones too, Timberline and Apache,
and those were looked at as character stones and really appreciated for the individual beauty of the stones. A lot of matrix, a lot of patterns. Dow Ward's mines were known for, Kingman had it as well, but obviously Sleeping Beauty didn't. But character was a big thing in the 70s as well.
Right, very big. Both of those companies were huge producers.
And it wasn't just Southwest Jewelry at that point. I know that's what drove the boom, but there were a lot of designers that were branching out and starting to get more mainstream with turquoise at that point. And then Sleeping Beauty kind of changed everything.
Right. But in the beginning, Hardy was selling tons to Germany. And he had an employee that was German, mm-hmm. and she was able to connect him to all the big dealers in Eder Oberstein.
And Eder Oberstein it's like mecca for gemstone cutting. Its prominence has waned a little bit with Thailand coming up and other areas of the world coming strong into cutting, but it's still regarded as one of the best gemstone cutting cities in the world.
Especially for their expertise, right, and their equipment.
German engineering.
Yeah, nobody has equipment like them.
So they were instrumental in really helping get turquoise truly out into the mainstream market.
Right, and then from there, Sleeping Beauty came in with that pure, clean blue, and that brought Italy in.
And so now you've got the gold market, you've got couture, you've got coral jewelry, and it paired up perfectly with that. And so all of a sudden, turquoise is crossed over into fine jewelry now because of Sleeping Beauty, and it's clean. So you didn't have that patterning, and it went with pretty much everything, and it paired really well with red coral. So that's what really pushed. But in the beginning, Sleeping Beauty was kind of a hard sell.
Very hard.
That's
I,
amazing.
When I first went up to see the Hardys, and LW had his wife's name was Geraldine, and she was a force in this business. And she basically told me, we don't need new customers, but here's a list of you can buy from.
It's a nice problem
And
to have.
on my way out the door, Mr. Hardy's office was right by the front door. He waved me in. And he said, we have a new mine. I promise you it will be the best in the world. It's not there now. And he had it in this little bag, like a lunch bag, and he poured it out on his desk. God awful stuff. And I bought it. I had no choice if I wanted to have a shot at it. And from there, it took about 5 years. No, maybe not 5, but 3 or 4 years to really get Sleeping Beauty going.
Isn't that interesting that it's looked at now as when it closed, people freaked out and thought, well, the turquoise market is dead.
Yeah.
Because this one mine, which is, it's an anomaly in that it had clean, perfect turquoise with no matrix to it. But I think the misunderstanding that a lot of people have is almost every turquoise mine has a percentage of the stone that comes out of the ground has that look. But with Sleeping Beauty, it was dominant. It was the most of it that came out of the ground had that look.
About 90%.
So it made it so that you could have a very uniform product, and at that point it crossed over into the fine jewelry market, and then the whole world fell in love with it. But it's interesting that it's not what people thought of when they thought of turquoise,
Right.
when they first saw Sleeping Beauty.
With the exception of the clean blue Persian,
Right.
which turned out a lot of it was coming from Sleeping Beauty.
The interesting thing about our industry is that origin is always such a difficult thing to follow or track. And turquoise is one of those stones where, although it's technically feasible to figure out a way to come up with a test to determine if this rock came from this place in the world, the cost of the test is actually more than the value of the stone, so no one's ever actually put that effort into it. So it goes back to, you have to trust who you buy from. But it's so interesting that Sleeping Beauty almost became a look instead of a mine. And it's still that way to some respect.
Even more so now that the mine, the Sleeping Beauty mine, is closed. So, yeah, I would say even more so.
Yeah, so when you see that stone and you see that perfect blue color, a lot of times you'll hear it's Sleeping Beauty-like, or it's a Sleeping Beauty grade.
Right.
People will
they'll
say
say it has the look of Sleeping Beauty.
yeah, or they just lie and say it's from Sleeping Beauty
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a lot of those guys too.
Yeah.
So Character Stone, though, has made a huge comeback. And I think obviously a lot of that is because Sleeping Beauty is closed, but it's not like there's not Sleeping Beauty in the market. There are still a lot of people that are pushing Sleeping Beauty, or that are taking other stones from other mines that look like Sleeping Beauty and either selling it as, or selling it as a stone that has a Sleeping Beauty look. But Character has made a huge resurgence. Besides Sleeping Beauty closing, what do you think is the main force behind that?
Well, that's something that actually is not new. This was long before your involvement, but Landers
Right.
turquoise is the the premium high dollar spiderweb turquoise.
Right.
There was only about maybe 200 pounds of it mined, but there's been probably 1 million pounds of it sold.
Only in our industry could that happen.
So
So Character Stone is, it's always been appreciated, but now there's a mainstream push again for appreciating, and it's all kinds. It's not just turquoise. I think whether it's malachite or azurite, there's a push again to get back to this kind of organic look in opaque gemstones, and turquoise offers something that's, I think, separated out from the other stones. What do you attribute? How much of the treatment of turquoise do you attribute to the success of it?
I think it's really a large part of the success because in the beginning, before the treatments came along,
Yep.
that's mainly stabilized, and the Zachary treatment are the two treatments today.
Mm-hmm.
And the stabilized was back in the early 70s, and it fueled that huge boom because of the sheer volume of it.
Right. And so for people who don't know, what percentage of turquoise needs to be treated on any specific mine or any given mine needs to be treated to be able to take a cut and polish? Is it a high percent?
It's I would say it's above 50%,
Yeah.
and each mine is different.
Right.
And they're just the taking a cut and polish is one thing, but the other thing is like Sleeping Beauty. If it wasn't treated, it would oxidize
Right.
and turn into not such a good color.
I mean, so what's crazy about that is this is Sleeping Beauty turquoise, and no one would believe that if they didn't understand turquoise. But turquoise is it's a ridiculously porous stone, so it really allows contaminants to enter the stone. So really good Sleeping Beauty, you could have the best, highest grade material and cut it and polish it, and it's a perfect blue, and it's great. If you don't treat it, over time, the porosity of the stone allows all of these contaminants to come into it, and they literally change the color of the stone. So when people talk about treatments, even people in our industry, they don't really understand turquoise because it's one of the few stones where natural isn't necessarily the best way to go with turquoise because you're almost guaranteed that it's going to change color.
That's true, and in my opinion, I always want the one of the treatments, which is the Zachary treatment, and because it will then stay.
It preserves your stone.
Right. It's always going to be that beautiful.
Right. And so if you don't know about the Zachary treatment, there is a gentleman named Jim Zachary who developed this process for treating turquoise. And actually, my father, Sterling, bought the process for him. This is back when you owned the Sleeping Beauty and the Kingman Mines. You bought this process from Jim Zachary. And to this day, people have been trying to figure out how to do it. People have been hiring chemists and engineering companies to figure out the secret of what it is you do. And no one to this day has been able to actually figure it out. But there's nothing in your stone other than turquoise. And that's the big difference between stabilized and Zachary, is that with stabilized, you have to use a polymer in the stone, and that hardens it, and it reduces the porosity by basically filling all of those pores with an acrylic or an epoxy. Sometimes they will color treat the stone by adding a dye, but most people don't. Most people who stabilize turquoise simply use an acrylic or an epoxy, a resin, to harden the stone and make it so that then no contaminants can come into the stone because they're filled with that polymer. But Zachary doesn't do that.
No, no. And if you would look at turquoise under a microscope, you would see all the voids of the stone. And after the stone has had the Zachary treatment, you would still see all those.
All those voids.
They would all still be present. And but if you think about turquoise in this way, it would be like a million little nuggets
Right.
that make up a big stone like these.
Right.
And what the Zachary treatment does is protect every one of those little nuggets from oxidation. So that in a nutshell is how it works.
It's amazing. And what's incredible about it is people who buy turquoise and think that they want an untreated stone because they want natural, pure turquoise that's completely natural. That's understandable. But if you buy that and then it changes color, what happens is that you think, oh, well, there's something wrong with turquoise. Because you bought a natural stone, and even if you had it certified by a lab like the GIA, the stone actually is the problem. And there are certain gemstones that need treatments to be viable. If you don't mind the change of the color, there are certain stones where the stone will change color and it's a character stone, and the stone kind of evolves as we do as people. We all get older, we all change, none of us look the same. So in that way, there is a group out there who prefers their turquoise completely natural and they want it changing with them over time. But for a stone like Sleeping Beauty, and for lots of other mines, the ability to have a stone that doesn't change color and doesn't have any polymers to it, Zachary's literally the only way to go.
I think so, and there's a lot of people that have the idea that natural, there's just one quality, and of course there's not, and so there's some that absolutely need help, and there's some that don't.
That's a really important point, because what happens when you're mining turquoise is you have various degrees of hardness. You have everything from what we call chalk turquoise, which literally will crumble in your hands and you could write on a chalkboard with it, to the hardest material, which internally within the turquoise business, we call that natural grade, meaning it doesn't need any treatment to take a cut and polish. It's a hard stone. It essentially finished cooking in the earth and got to that point. But natural, what we call natural, is a specific grade of turquoise in our industry. We're not actually referring to the difference between treated or untreated. The confusing part there is chalk turquoise is natural, but it can't be cut and polished. So without the treatments, it's literally worthless.
Correct. And the other factor with natural turquoise, even if it's hard, and Sleeping Beauty was the most vulnerable to it, is the stone oxidizes at different uses.
Right.
If you have round beads and you have them on your neck, your stone's going to oxidize
Fast.
very fast if it's not protected.
You have so many oils in your skin that just, it's like a sponge. I mean, it just absorbs all those oils and it changes color like that.
And that also is conditional by who's wearing it.
Right.
Because some people just kill the stone, and some it takes a little bit longer.
Right.
But it's one of those things. If you have a beautiful Sleeping Beauty stone in a silver setting,
Yeah.
it's going to take longer
Yeah.
to oxidize.
Right. Pro tip, ladies out there, that if you have turquoise necklaces, put your perfume on before. you put it on. Treat it like pearls. That's the best way to approach it. But if you have a treated product, whether it's stabilized or with a Zachary treatment, actually doesn't matter because it's not going to change color. And that's the advantage of having a treated stone. You should absolutely get disclosure from whoever it is that's selling you your stone so that you know what the treatment is, because sometimes they're dyeing stones, sometimes stone is compressed. I hear a lot of people in our business talk about this reconstituted turquoise. And I keep trying to tell people that there's really no such thing as reconstituted turquoise, because this block, what they say happens with reconstituted turquoise is that you take something like this raw material and you powder it, put it in a ball mill, and you break it up until it's nothing but powder, and then you add resin and you add dye, and then you bake it into a brick with a hydraulic press. The reason that can't actually be true is because the cost of the block when you're done with it, that brick, is less than the turquoise would cost to buy it, to pulverize it, and put into that brick.
Gemtales will return after this short message.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you missed the earlier parts, this is the Generation Gems podcast. I'm Mathew Foutz, and I'm here with my dad, Sterling Foutz, and we're talking all things turquoise. So we were talking about character stone, and one of the stones that I've always been fascinated with is number 8, the number 8 mine. So this is a Nevada turquoise, and it's known for this beautiful spiderweb pattern. It's got kind of a teal blue color, but that brown matrix spiderweb pattern. It's been closed for decades. I think it's 76 is what
75.
75. So it's been a long time, but you're still able to find some number 8 on the market. And I think that talks to how prolific it was. But Dal Ward was the one that had that mine, correct?
Yes, and Dal was a rancher up in Nevada. He was actually good friends with your grandfather,
with Reed.
My dad. And that's how I met Dal.
Wow.
And then when he found out I was in the turquoise business, then we became good buds. So, that number 8 mine, he had at one time 1 million pounds of it out of the ground.
Pounds.
And I went with my partner, Bob Meyer. He invited us up to see both the Fox mine and all of his inventory of the number 8 mine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a place that's Crescent Valley, Nevada. There's not much around there, not many people anyway.
Right.
And but it was a good trip for us. And at that time, he still had about 600,000 pounds, and he was a big mover in the industry, just like Hardy's, and he pretty much dominated Nevada because he also had that Fox mine,
Right.
and the Timberline, which were both. Fox was like Sleeping Beauty, but
Right.
it wasn't that beautiful blue.
Right.
And
It had almost a more teal color to it.
more of a teal. And he always wanted me to try and make it blue. And, of course, that's not something you can do.
So that's an interesting point, the Zachary process. A lot of people call that process enhanced turquoise because it's harder, it takes a better polish, and we know that it's not going to change color. But you can't fix color with the Zachary process.
If a stone is off color, it's going to be off color.
It truly enhances whatever aspects the stone have to begin with. So
Right.
if it's, you know, if there are color problems with the stone, it's just going to exacerbate them.
Right, right. It's actually gonna, if it's a problem color,
Yeah.
it's best to leave it alone.
Right.
Which is what I told Dow, and but
A guy can hope.
that was a very prolific mine, that Fox mine,
Yeah.
and it had these beautiful big potato-sized nuggets. So I think it broke his heart that he never hit the blue the way Hardy did.
Yeah.
So
Which is crazy because it was such a. I mean, I understand having stone envy, but it was such a beautiful stone in its own right.
oh, absolutely. Fox is still, there's people that have it. I processed some this week, and they're still using it, and still it's on the market and it's in demand.
Right.
Probably in more demand now than when Dow Ward first started mining it.
Well, and what happens with all of these mines is they all become collectors editions. You know.
Right, absolutely, and depending on the quality of the turquoise, like Morenci or Bisbee,
Right.
They become very expensive.
Sure. Sure.
And people do want to collect it.
Yeah. And they're unique. I mean, it's hard to find the material, but it also has somewhat of a unique look to it that it would be hard to pass off another stone as that stone to begin with. But I remember a few years ago when we were at the Tucson show and someone came up to us and showed us this material that I thought was number 8. And when we looked at it, you said it looked very similar to number 8, but these guys said it was from Kazakhstan.
Yes.
So this material that, I mean, I didn't know that there was turquoise there, but they were pulling out material in Kazakhstan that was a dead ringer for number 8.
Right, they were, and they had a pretty good run with it
Yeah.
until people realized it wasn't really number 8.
Yeah.
And they never, to my knowledge, tried to sell it as number 8.
No, when they approached me, I mean, they were very clear that this was from Kazakhstan. They were interested in developing their mine.
Right.
Part of the problem is, you know, they could only mine like a month and a half out of the year because it was too
Yeah.
cold.
And there is a lot of turquoise now there's a mine called the Lavender Pit in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
Or Kazakhstan. And it's very hot turquoise right
It's
now.
beautiful. It's got such a unique look to it.
Yeah,
It's almost that kind of purplish, but it's a softer color too.
it is. It's some of it has almost no color,
Yeah.
and then it has veins of purple, and
Yeah.
it's really pretty stone.
It's incredible. So number 8 though was I mean, when Dow Ward was mining that, to have a 1,000,000 pounds of something, that's you have to be in a lot more than just the Native American market in Southwest jewelry at that point. I mean, it had to be all
Right.
over the world.
Dow Ward was the first person to go to overseas to have his stone cut, and he used to send about 2,000 pounds a month
Wow.
to be cut, and then it all went to Persia from there.
Interesting.
And so there, and of course, there's a huge market at that time in the Middle East
Right.
before all this unrest started.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty much what he had, was that overseas Middle East market, and already had Germany and Italy and the U.S.
Right. And the Persian market had already a huge appreciation for turquoise because of Persian turquoise,
Right.
which was kind of a cross between what you see with Sleeping Beauty and what you see with number 8.
Right.
I mean, it had both basically.
Yes. Yeah. As a matter of fact,
It's still
and
producing, right?
It, huh?
It's still producing. I mean, there's still some areas there that are producing
in
in the Persian turquoise area.
Oh yeah, we process some Persian all the time, and a lot of that did come from Dow Ward. You know, the
Right.
other thing about the number 8, going back to number 8, it had tremendous size.
Right.
There was one nugget that Dow had that was big as this table.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it was 852 pounds. And he was trying to donate it to the Smithsonian Institute, but they never could come to terms on how much it was worth. So, and I don't know what happened to it after that.
Interesting.
Probably his widow has it.
The thing about large size with turquoise, it does a couple of things. One is you enter into another market, which is the carvings market. So you're able to sell it to people who do carvings, decorative carvings. That's a big market over in China and in India. But then also, if you're cutting turquoise for jewelry, you get a much better yield if you start with really large stones.
Right.
Meaning when you cut the stone, the end weight of what your cut stones are is much better if the stone is larger. There's not as much waste. And in what we call a calibrated market, where all the stones have to be a certain size, for when you're building a mass market, or if you're building a market for even for couture jewelry, if you're going to be selling a lot of them, you need the castings to be a very specific size. So the turquoise has to be cut to certain standards, and those standards allow the entire industry to build products based on your stone because you've cut it into the industry standards. When you do that, you end up with a much bigger waste. And turquoise is a soft stone, so every time it hits that saw, it eats up a lot of the stone. You lose a lot of material. So the larger your stone is, the better your end weight is going to be. The better end weight, the more you're able to sell. And because you buy turquoise by the weight to begin with, you can make more money, or there's a higher profit in it if you start with a really large stone. So that's why, one of the explanations of why that material was so sought after.
And also, Matt, if you need matchable stone,
Absolutely.
you're going to get you have a much better chance out of a big rock being able to match all the stones.
Particularly for beads, because when you're cutting beads, if there's one bead in that strand that's a little bit different hue, and if you've ever had to try to match up turquoise after it's been cut so that it's all the same color, you wouldn't believe how many different shades or hues there are in a batch of turquoise. It will drive you absolutely bonkers. What'll happen is you'll see blue when you close your eyes for hours. But if you're starting with large stones, then it's much easier to match for beads, which beads was a big market. I mean, those large beads, you don't see them nearly as much now as you did then.
No, and one of the reasons is because people like large beads.
Right.
And a lot of the mines right now they're producing smaller stones, and so then exactly what you said, matching them up becomes you have to have a huge inventory.
Right.
And,
To begin with. Right.
a lot of people don't have that appetite right now.
So where with all of these mines kind of in their twilight now, a lot of them are closed. We know that, Kingman is on borrowed time. There are a lot of mines that are towards the end of their production. Where are we looking to as the next area that's going to be able to supply the world with turquoise?
Well, we've been looking at the Sonoran, Mexico mines. There's a lot of really good turquoise down there. There's a lot of labor to bring that turquoise out.
Yep.
And it's a turquoise that takes both treatments, either the stabilized or the Zachary treatment, really well.
Right.
And so it's right now, I think, is really getting a good foothold into the market.
It's taken years to get to that point, though.
Right, it has. And traditionally, a mine is probably, a turquoise mine is probably good for 25 to 50 years.
Yeah.
And then it's done.
Right.
And but in Mexico and in the Sonoran mines, it actually has already been that long, and they're still really mining.
In some areas, we think that they're just kind of scratching the surface, that we think they're
Yeah.
about to hit where the larger, better quality stones are going to start coming out.
Yeah, I think so. And there was a time in the past when the Cananea mine had huge pieces just like number 8 did.
Right.
And so we're hoping again for that. But the turquoise mines has an enemy, and it's the big copper mines.
Right.
And the big copper mines have no problem with destroying all the turquoise just so that they can leach the copper out. And so that has really slowed down production of turquoise in the U.S. and also some other places like Chile.
Right.
And,
Well, and in the
Peru.
U.S., the mining restrictions, I mean, if you're a small miner, it's almost impossible to mine in this country anymore.
Right, very hard.
I mean, it's the restrictions are,
The only place that it's happening now is in Nevada.
yeah,
And that's because those people, mainly it's one family, and they're all pretty much grandfathered in.
yeah,
And there's a lot of
right.
them. So they'll be able to stay a while.
You're talking about the Ottoson family.
Yeah.
And great guys. When I say you have to be a little bit crazy to be a miner, I'm specifically, I envision some of the Ottosons.
They fit the bill.
Tony has promised to come do a podcast with me, so
Yeah. That'll
that should be fun.
That'll be a lot of fun.
For sure. So, aside from Mexico, we saw some material coming out of China years ago, and of course, China has some fantastic turquoise from the Hubei material, but we're still not seeing big deposits coming out of there of anything new recently.
No, and I went to the Hubei mine,
Yeah.
and the Chinese actually told me I could go down in the mine if I wanted with escort, but I didn't want to go in that mine. It's
Dangerous.
7 miles of shafts and tunnels
Wow.
under that mountain, and I just didn't know if they were quite up to speed on all the
Maybe they were just trying to get rid of you too.
yeah, could be all the security, but that was a prolific producer of turquoise
Right.
back in the 70s. It's still producing, but it's less. And there are other mines over there that were big producers, but the big problem there is the Chinese government,
Right.
and they don't seem to be getting better.
No.
So
No. I would say that's an understatement. I mean, we just looked at the situation with Hong Kong now, and the Hong Kong trade show in September is the biggest trade show in the world, and for jewelry, we don't know if it's even going to be able to continue now. I mean, COVID aside, the the problems with unrest there, and then now with the U.S. basically taking the tax exempt status away, the preferred trading partner status away from Hong Kong, it's paralyzed the industry because we don't know if anyone will want to go do that show now. It totally renders cash and carry obsolete, and it makes it so that it's going to be much, much more difficult to do that show. So no, I wouldn't anticipate that China's going to be our savior from
No,
supply on turquoise.
I because I've been doing this for quite a while. Bob and I went to the Guangzhou show when it was pretty new. It was about 4 stories, and but they weren't very sophisticated in their booths like Hong Kong is now. So you can see the range of how quickly they do get things. So, but I remember going to that first Guangzhou show, and there was one booth that had a big dump truck. That's all they had in that booth was one big dump truck.
That was their booth.
That was their booth. They were selling dump trucks, and next to it, they had a booth with a guy with a little bit of jewelry, and the whole show was that way. And there was no way to know where your booth was that you're looking for.
Wow.
And but they got that under control pretty fast.
Yeah. You started a factory in China. You were one of the first small businesses in Arizona to actually have a joint venture with a Chinese entity and build a cutting factory in China.
Yes.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, that was in Yunxian, China, and that was we were getting Hubei turquoise then,
right.
and it was quite a struggle in the beginning. I have pictures somewhere I could show you. They didn't have water on their machines, so the dust level in that factory was unbelievable, and that was the first thing that we changed.
Didn't they just burn up the stone too?
I don't know.
Those blades must have been hot.
We changed that really fast.
Yeah.
And but I do have those original pictures. Matter of fact, that our foreman was Mike Carter at that time.
Right.
And
Mike's still over there.
Huh?
And Mike's still over there.
Yeah, he's been there all that time, and he his hair was like it's hard to explain, but Bob captured the perfect picture
Just
of him.
full of dust and.
Oh yeah,
That's back when he had hair, because he doesn't have hair
yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
We might know this. We might have solved the mystery on why Mike no longer has hair. Just that dates back to that fact.
Yeah, that dust. Oh.
But I mean, talking about the Wild West of turquoise, when you were back there in China at that time, that was truly the wilderness back then as well, because Shenzhen was when I went with you the first time, I think that was 85 or 86, when we went, Shenzhen was a tiny little town. I mean, not tiny, but there were less than 1 million people in Shenzhen.
Yeah, it was about 250,000
and
the first time I went.
And now is it 16 million? I mean, and that's in the span of, it was 30 years or so. So it's incredible how much it's changed. But back in those days, I remember the story you told of where you and Bob got stuck. You were at were you going to see a mine?
We were in Wuhan. And we were going to the mine up in Hubei.
You were in Wuhan.
We were in Wuhan. And
See, all things lead back to turquoise. I'm trying to tell you people that all things lead back to turquoise. Back in Wuhan. Okay, sorry.
so yeah, we were in Wuhan, and we were flying up to I can't remember the name of the little town by where the mine was. And we had tickets.
Okay.
And every day we'd go, we knew when it was. We knew when the plane was flying. Only one a day.
Right.
Every day we went, and they'd say, no flight today. And it took us a while to figure it out, but they weren't going to fly until the plane was full. So we didn't know that. So we spent quite a while in Wuhan.
And it's not like there was anything to do in Wuhan.
Oh, no, nothing.
I mean,
Well, especially nobody spoke English.
and you're in a hotel. You don't have any TV that's in English.
No. Even though it was called the All-American Hotel. There were no menus that had English. There was no.
Some interesting food choices
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, learned a lot.
True wilderness. Well, I mean, from your entitled and privileged sons, I'll speak for Ryan as well. Thanks for blazing the path for us, because it got considerably easier thanks to your efforts.
You're welcome. I remember the first time I took you over there.
Yeah.
And took you to lunch.
That was an experience. We went to lunch, and my grandfather and my uncle went with us as well. And so we went to, and at this time, the hotel situation had improved a lot from when you and Bob had gone. I mean, this was a nice hotel.
Yeah.
But they had a Western food restaurant and a Chinese food restaurant. And I thought it would be Chinese food like I was used to in the States. And Chinese food in the States isn't Chinese food.
Right.
So when we sat down at that table, and they had the big turntable where everything just got passed around, and I remember Grandpa ordered the baby back ribs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're just not sure what animal it was from, but they were a surprise. I think they were pigeon.
Yeah, they were tiny.
They were small. That was they took the name baby literally because they were small ribs.
Yeah.
And Uncle Lonnie was not happy with his food.
Yeah.
I think he just survived on cigarettes on that trip. That was his way of getting through it. But we did bring some peanut butter. That was the only way to have some semblance of normalcy, because I'm not nearly as picky as I used to be with food, but that was tough for me.
Yeah, and the first trip that I took was with my partner Bob and my dad.
Yeah.
And there just was not anything, even in Hong Kong,
Right.
that we had found we could eat. And we kind of made a pact that one of us would order something and take a bite of it. And usually that bite filled all three of us up. And we were gone back to the hotel.
It's amazing how much you can survive on when you can't eat the food.
Yep.
And the crazy thing is that it's changed so much, because I've gone to Hong Kong to do the trade show over there with Italian friends who will swear that it's the best Italian food they've ever had in a restaurant in Hong Kong. It's some of the best cuisine in the world now.
And I'd agree with them.
Yeah.
That's it's really
It's changed.
come a long way. Yeah.
Hong Kong's completely different. And I think mainland China's gotten better, but it's not Hong Kong.
Yeah, no.
That's for sure.
They're trying to make it that way, though.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
So Sonoran Turquoise, now, I mean, we see beautiful stones coming out. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that green is making a really big surge again. And we haven't seen green for a long time. I mean, there was some green Chinese turquoise that was really beautiful, and some Kingman material, but you're seeing green come out of the Sonoran material that's just absolutely stunning. Talk to me a little bit about the transition into green and how strong the response has been.
Well, I think Mexico always had it,
Yeah,
but at that time they were trying to compete with Sleeping Beauty.
right.
Everything, all of the thought process was blue. It even caused most of the Nevada mines to shut down because they didn't really have blue up there.
Because there was such a bias that turquoise needed to look like Sleeping Beauty to be turquoise.
Right. Yeah. And
Amazing.
so when we got more involved in the Sonoran turquoise, we realized that green's untouched.
Yeah,
It's there, and it's there in volume. And so we started working, and of course, your brother Ryan has a big part of that, and you know that. And so we started telling them what we wanted, and they were happy because it was untouched.
right.
And so it was easy for them to mine,
There was a place to
And-
go
and-
with green all of a sudden.
and they could sell it.
It's amazing what happens in our industry so often is the industry decides what's beautiful instead of letting consumers decide.
Right.
And we get in our own way. You know, we saw this with chocolate diamonds, where it took the Levian company coming up with this kind of gimmick of naming brown diamonds chocolate. But our industry forever has said there's no value in brown diamonds if it's not a white diamond, if it's not, you know, colorless white diamond, it's not attractive, and it's worth literally nothing. And when they built that campaign around chocolate diamonds, it turns out if you show a woman or a man, but predominantly women, if you show them a diamond that is cut right and it's a beautiful chocolate color, they'll love it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's kind of happened the same way with turquoise, where for a long time, because Sleeping Beauty was the dominant color and complexion, that all of these other stones were rendered unattractive by the industry rather than letting the consumers.
Yeah, less than
Yeah,
when they weren't.
they weren't. In a lot of ways, there is a bigger market for, you know, that organic and character look in the stone, and we're seeing that now. So you think that Sonoran has still got a lot to offer?
Yeah, I think that it right now is probably the big producer.
Do you think that we're going to keep finding more new looks, or is there enough momentum now that these kind of untouched mines or mines that have been mothballed are going to start popping up again?
I think to some extent, yes. The back to the copper companies,
Right.
they have taken away pretty much the Nakasari mine, the Cananea mine, some of the Campitos mines,
Yep.
and but all of the green Sonoran mines are pretty much untouched, and will it'll be quite a while, I think, that they will produce.
Yeah. But we've got a good run ahead of us with Sonoran, which is great because, when you look at the dwindling production of Kingman, it's tough. Those guys are not able to go get the material that they used to. There's so many regulations on them that are
Right.
preventing that.
Yeah.
So we're at a point where the U.S. mines are either very small production, or they're pretty much mined out, and we have to deal with whatever available material is in the market, and there's definitely a timeline on that.
And what happens when you have that small of a mine, like all the Nevada mines?
Yeah.
They're going to keep it for themselves.
Sure.
They're going to put it in their jewelry.
Yep.
And they're going to go right to the retail customer.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to keep going.
Right.
And I don't know, but I think that will not be a long standing thing. There's just not that many Tony Cottoners.
Right. And it's difficult to go from that to a commercial mine because there's so much investment that needs to go into it. And unless you have, we talk about the copper mines as kind of the big villain in the case, but in all of the largest producing mines, I don't know about number 8, but certainly with Kingman and Sleeping Beauty, if you didn't have the copper mine to begin with, those mines probably never would have been as big as they got.
No, as a matter of fact, the number 8, Dow Ward did not mine it. It was mined, I believe at that time it was Kennecott.
Right.
And the same with Hardy and Kingman. He didn't mind. Well, what they would do, at that time it was called Mineral Park.
Yeah.
And what they would do is when they hit Turquoise, he had a contract with them. And they would let him come in and mine the Turquoise. But they did all the heavy digging.
Right.
All the massive moving of overburden.
Right.
Which made it a really good deal for him. And also for Chuck Colbaugh, who was Marty's
dead. His grandfather.
Grandfather.
Yeah.
He had the contract for the conveyor belts.
Right.
And so
that was just picking. They were basically picking through the
off
the
of
ore.
those belts.
Right.
And everything that came down those belts, he had to get it before it went to the crusher.
Right.
So
Gemtails will return after this short message.
Thanks for joining us. For those of you who are just joining us, this is the Generation Gems podcast, the number 1 episode of Generation Gems podcast. And I'm Mathew Foutz, and I'm here with my dad, Sterling Foutz, and we're talking all things turquoise. We were talking about this kind of symbiotic relationship of the copper mines and the turquoise mines, and how you really couldn't have a massive turquoise operation without the copper company kind of doing some of the heavy lifting. But then also the copper company doesn't really want you there, so you've got to be a little creative in how you worked around that. How did they do that at Kingman?
Well, in Kingman was a little bit different than everybody else because they had their own smelter.
Right.
And so they would do all of the mining. And the most famous turquoise in Kingman was called Ithaca Peak.
Right.
And that's because Ithaca Peak was actually the tallest mountain in Kingman. And so they had to knock the top of the peak off.
Yeah.
And that's how Hardy got involved, because he was a miner in Globe. He was a shovel operator in Globe. And when they took that cap off of the Ithaca Peak Mountain, they hit this fantastic amount of black spiderweb turquoise.
That perfect, gorgeous electric blue color, and there was some quartz in there too. I mean, it was truly gorgeous material.
And it was about 25 feet below the surface.
Yeah.
And so they allowed Hardy to come in and bid a contract, which he won. And then Chuck Coball got the contract of the belts, which is what we talked about earlier. So, they had so much heavy equipment up there moving that mountain
Yeah.
so they could get down to where the copper was.
Right.
And all along the way, they would hit big pockets of turquoise.
Yeah.
And with the contract that Hardy had worked out, then they notified his crew, and then they came in and started picking. And at that time, there was so much of it. They only picked the real big pieces, big nuggets, and they filled up pickup trucks. Wow. And they would haul them over to L.W. Hardy and Geraldine Hardy's plant there in Kingman.
Yep.
And he'd buy it from them. And I don't know what the true price was, but I heard it was like $2 a pound.
Wow.
But he'd buy whatever they brought. And a pickup truck will hold quite a bit of turquoise.
Yeah.
And every day. And that's how he got his dominance
Yeah.
of both the market in Germany and the U.S. and the ability to control things here.
It's incredible. It's interesting too because while the copper company is instrumental in helping you get to that commercial capability of really having, tons of material, at a certain point, the copper company is looking for copper. So when you look at Morenci, you're not hitting any turquoise anymore because they're digging too deep now.
Right. And what killed the turquoise in these big mines was technology. They came up with leaching,
Yeah.
and it didn't pay in their minds for them to take the time to let a mining company, turquoise mining company, come in and slow them down.
Right.
And it's kind of funny because right now they'd probably be happy to have a turquoise mine
You would
coming
think.
in. But you never
Who
know.
knows? But so the leaching, basically what they do is they're throwing all of the copper ore. You find turquoise where you find copper. And that copper ore goes into these leach pits, and it's just an acid bath, and it will absolutely destroy any turquoise that's there. So we're at a point now where if you can find a copper company that will allow you to come in and be on the premises, you're lucky. And that's actually what closed Sleeping Beauty. A lot of people think it ran out of turquoise. It didn't. I mean, it wasn't producing like it used to, but the reason Sleeping Beauty, the turquoise mine, ended was because their lease with a copper company ended, correct?
Yes, and the Sleeping Beauty mine was always different from the Kingman mine. The actual copper company didn't do any of the mining for turquoise,
Right.
and then let Hardy go in there. It allowed Hardy to have a contract. He was the original guy to have a contract to do his own mining. And so that was the first Arizona mine that happened.
Right.
And he became very successful at it because of his knowledge and all the time that he had spent being a miner himself for the big copper companies. So they and that Sleeping Beauty pit, I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah.
I think you did. It was like I don't know, half a mile deep.
Yeah.
Now, and it was nothing like you were just down in Morenci.
Yep.
It's nothing like those pits.
No.
Those pits are, those pits are almost as big as Rhode Island.
Right.
I mean,
Well, Morenci at one point was the largest copper mine in the world. And so it's, of course, we got turquoise and azurite, malachite out of that mine. But the Sleeping Beauty situation, like you said, it was unique. It was a unique relationship between the turquoise mine and the copper mine, and we haven't really seen anything like that since. I mean, that was
no.
in the same way that the Sleeping Beauty turquoise was an anomaly in the turquoise world from a look. It also was an anomaly in how they operated.
Yes.
Everything about it was special.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, when we purchased the lease from Hardy, it was really interesting for me because I always loved heavy equipment.
yeah,
Even though they wouldn't let me, my own guys, my own supervisors, wouldn't let me touch the equipment because of insurance reasons.
Right.
You had to. But anyway, it was such a great feeling to go to that mine
yeah,
and just get off to myself. And they always had my little pick for me. And I'd
your
get
bucket?
off and they already knew where I could go pick and get something. So
so they steered you in the right direction.
yeah. And I'd go spend an hour or two each time I went up to the mine and pick some of that.
There is something special about being able to discover a stone in the earth because you're transported back to being a kid, and it's
Yep.
like you're finding this magic. I always have said that, gemstones are kind of the last real magic that we have, but there is something that you can't describe to people, where when you have the ability to go dig and find a real gemstone in the earth, it's incredible.
Yeah, it is. And at one time, I had this idea that we need to open this up to the tour buses and let them come out here and go pick.
Right.
And called my insurance agent, and he said, "Don't even think it." So that was that.
Well, there are places that do that, but they don't. I mean, you almost don't find real stones. I mean, maybe it's
Yeah.
quartz or whatever, but
Yeah.
but on an open pit active mine, I can imagine where that would have been pretty dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Well, I think we officially made it through our first podcast for Generation Gems. I can't thank you enough, Dad, for sitting down and sharing the stories with me. I know you've told me all these stories a million times, but it's
It was my pleasure, Matt.
thanks.
I really enjoyed this.
So that's it for us here for the first episode of Generation Gems podcast. There'll be plenty more episodes to catch. Check us out at the website, generationgems.com, and we'll see you soon.